Hello and welcome into the Fog.net podcast. My name is Michael Swain, the Kansas beat writer for 24/7 Sports. It's a Sunday afternoon this time, which means we're talking to Kevin Flaherty. We're going to break down Kansas football's 32-28 defeat to West Virginia in Morgantown yesterday. A little bit of a longer affair with the weather delay, lightning delay, but in the end, KU falls to 1-3 on the season. Kevin, I'm in a torturous mood right now. I just watched Arsenal give away a 2-1 win at Man City in the
Oh,
last minute. And so I'm down in the dumps now. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be in the right mood to talk about a game where KU also gave away a should-be win. So I don't even know where to start on this one, Kevin. Do we need to start at the end with the way things ended,
you
or
know,
do
it,
you want to go back early in the game? Because honestly, this is a game that, like, early on, you're kind of thinking, this is not maybe the best start for KU maybe would have wanted.
yeah, for sure. And I thought heading in, West Virginia was a team that was going to really trouble KU in some ways. Yeah, and a lot of people
Yeah.
thought, hey, West Virginia struggled. They just gave away a game. They're in the exact same spot. But it was one of those where I felt like some of West Virginia's strengths kind of matched up with KU's weaknesses a little bit,
Mm-mm.
especially coming off a game where you don't really slow down a running quarterback, and then all of a sudden you get Garrett Green, who is an excellent running quarterback. I think the pass blocking has been kind of hit or miss, and West Virginia's secondary had really struggled, as you brought up this past week. But the pass rush from West Virginia had been really good
Yep.
heading in, and I think that both of those really showed up on game day, and West Virginia kind of taking that early lead. It wasn't necessarily something where you thought, hey, KU's out of it, but Swain, if Kobe Bryant didn't have that early interception, we might not have been in position to be mad at the way the game ended, because it might have been something where West Virginia was able to be a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. And I think right for KU, the defense I thought started the game at least with a good drive. Showed some positive things. DJ Warner makes good play in coverage. DJ Withers gets the tackle for loss. Then a pass breakup, right? You're thinking, all right, like that's what you're looking for. And
Yep.
then, right, KU's offense comes out and isn't able to take advantage early in the game when it has felt to me, Kevin, like KU's offense has typically in the first one or two drives of a game, they've done pretty well, right? If you look back against UNLV, KU started the game really well. You look back against Illinois, KU's first drive was an interception, but then the second drive they go and score. And so far this season, it felt like KU starting okay on offense. It was really the second half where things maybe hadn't gone so well offensively. And for KU, all of a sudden, they start the game like this, and then you're right, like it felt like things might be getting away. And Kobe
Yeah.
Bryant makes the big interception following, Jalen Daniels' interception. And I feel so silly, Kevin. I joked on radio this week. I can't remember who I was talking to, but I joked that, hey, if Jalen Daniels shows improvement, right? He threw 3 interceptions against Illinois. He threw 2 last week against UNLV. I'm like, if he shows improvement and throws 1 interception this week, I'll feel really good about the offense. Kevin, we're sitting here on Sunday. I don't feel really good about the offense. I feel okay about the offense. We'll
Yeah.
probably talk about the defense and their struggles, but that interception, Kevin, I mean, like, it's just bad. And I think overall, Jalen did some good things, but we're at the point now where that's just a terrible interception. You got to see the guy underneath, and Jalen doesn't. And like, there are just moments, Kevin, where I'm still just like, man, what is going on here?
Was that his worst interception, you think? It might have been. I mean, if you're just looking at them and saying, I mean, the one that he tried to pepper between two guys against UNLV wasn't great,
Yeah,
but at the same time, a couple he was a little late, and that allowed a safety to
sure.
get in, or whatever else. The interception against Lindenwood was a miscommunication where, I mean, Grimm made the right read, he didn't, but at the same
Yeah.
time, it was more of a miscommunication as opposed to just an out and out bad decision. In that case, that was about as bad as I think they've been. And to his credit, I thought Jalen played pretty well after that, and he continued to throw the ball with confidence. I think the deep ball he missed to Luke Grimm, I think he actually put in the right spot in terms of the defender
Okay,
was on the inside.
yeah.
He kind of laid it out to the outside, but Grimm was looking to the inside. And so one of those things. But generally speaking, I thought he threw the ball pretty well, especially for the amount of pressure that he was facing. And I think
Yeah.
we're going to talk about two very different offensive lines in this thing, Swain, because I thought the offensive line generally was pretty terrific when they were moving forward and when they were blocking in the run game. I thought the offensive line really, really struggled to keep Jalen Daniels clean, keep him with a clean pocket. Some of the plays that Jalen made, he was having to bail out of the pocket a step or two into his drop, and that
Yeah.
made him certainly a lot more challenging.
Yeah. So on the interception, I think you're right, Kevin. Like, I think when you watch that Lindenwood one, you're like, what the heck was that? That was weird. When you watch this one, right, there's just the guy in the zone in the flat, and you're just watching it like, how do you not see that guy's there and has the ability to make a play? So that was bad. I think you're right. Like, I think all things considered, Jalen Daniels was not the issue at the end of the day for Kansas in this game. Like, I think you could argue he maybe was in the previous two games. Did he miss some throws? Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Totally did. Right. I think about the one on third down to Lawrence Arnold that he threw a little too far in front of Arnold. There's the one you mentioned, Luke Grimm. Like, is that a miscommunication? Is that an inaccurate throw? That's a hard one to know, but that's one that you feel like, man, 2022 Jalen Daniels, they connect on that because they're going to be in that much in sync, on the same page, and feeling where Jalen's going to feel where Luke's going to be, and Luke's going to know where Jalen's going to throw. And I think there's just still something a little bit off, but all things considered, like the fact that he was under that much pressure, and there was that one hit he took as well when he like threw it and the guy hit him right in the midsection. I'm just like,
yeah,
that's the type of hit that you're trying to keep Jalen from taking. Because those are the types of hits that when you're squaring up a quarterback, right? That's when a guy can get hurt. And I thought Jalen did a good job of standing in there. I thought he showed some resiliency, staying in the pocket, biding his time, making some good throws. I loved what KU did in the second half, where they tried to, on early downs, get the ball to the outside, quick out routes, easy throws on first down, make it 2nd and 2. And then you could run the ball. Because as we've seen, right, with the offense, when they have to get into this whole run, pass type of situation, it just hasn't really gone well. And so I love that they did that. So I think, look, like for KU and Jalen, it was a performance that you look at the numbers at the end of the day, it's fine. You can win a football game with the types of numbers, right? About 7 yards per attempt, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Like, you can win a game with that.
Well, and I think, too, the other part of it that doesn't show up in the numbers but shows up in some other players' numbers is he was really effective running the speed option. He had some really timely pitches and was really good in that phase of it. I think that's, to be frank, we're going to get into it, I'm sure, a lot more, a certain 3rd and 4 at the end of the game. Yeah. But I think that's why a lot of people in that situation kind of wanted to see speed option was, hey, this thing's been effective all game. You're giving him a chance to make the defense wrong after the snap, right? Because there's the pre-snap reads, and then after the snap, you have a chance to either tuck it and go or make a pitch. And so I think that was part of the reason a lot of people wanted to see speed option in that circumstance. But I thought, as much as all of that, I thought Jalen played with more confidence, it seemed like, than really he had played. And that wasn't a given how much pressure he was facing on a down-to-down basis when he dropped back to pass. And so I thought this was the most Jalen-like, I guess, we've seen Jalen so far this season.
Yeah. And Kevin, I mean, do you still feel like there's something that's missing with him?
Yeah, a little bit. The Arnold thing was another one, to your talking about communication stuff. Yeah. I feel like they just had a natural feel for that when Jalen was playing more in like 22 and stuff like that. Because I'm not even saying Jalen was wrong there. There was a defender on this side of Arnold. And so maybe you say, hey, if he keeps moving away from that defender, this is where the ball needs to be. Arnold kind of stopped. But I feel like they weren't having those miscommunications a year or two ago. And so I do think there's a little bit of something missing. I don't know if it's just Jalen or if it's, hey, we're getting used to playing with Jalen again or what the deal is. But but there is something that's just a little bit off there. It's not 100% at this point.
I agree. It's still not quite there. I will say, like, again, I joked about the interceptions, but it does feel like this was at least a game where you felt some improvement.
Yeah.
And yet, at the end of the game, there's that third down, and we can talk about that now, Kevin.
Yeah.
Right, the 3rd down and 4. You need a play. And to me, it was just so interesting that, what the play call ends up being. I'm not saying it was wrong, right? You can watch the play a couple times and you'll see that if the offensive line blocks it right, KU could get a first down. But the offensive line didn't block it right, and West Virginia was able to get some penetration and stuff that play. The play call, though, is very interesting to me because I think it shows where the confidence is.
Sure.
I don't think that was a play call that says we have 100% confidence in Jalen Daniels to make the right decision right now. And that's whether that be through the air, throwing the ball, or on the ground running that speed option. It says something, Kevin, when a beat writer on an opposing team is asking why isn't the team that's going against team I'm covering running this play?
Yeah.
And that's what happened with Chris Anderson, who we had on the podcast last week, right? He had a great tweet. Kansas, for the last hour of the game, like real time, not the actual,
Sure.
game freaking hour. So, but the last like hour of real time of the game, KU had so much success with that speed option. How many times did they go to it to get a first down? And then when that big moment comes, right, the ball's not in Jalen's hand. And that to me gives me a little like, because I don't think the coaches are fully there where they trust Jalen to make the right decision in the right time of the game. Because if they did, I think you put the ball in your quarterback's hands and say, hey, regardless, one timeout for West Virginia really isn't gonna. How much is that gonna do?
Well, look at the Illinois game. They're running RPO in that situation.
Exactly.
I mean, there's a run option. There's a run component to that. But the other part is you're trusting your quarterback to decide whether or not to pull it and then make the throw. That wasn't an RPO concept or didn't appear to be really an RPO deal. And so, yeah, it was an interesting decision to run, basically zone to the short side of the field. And so I don't have a problem running the ball there, especially the quote unquote clock is your friend, whatever else. But I do think that people are going to pan that specific play call. People who say, oh, he ran it 3 times. Well, of course you're going to run it the first 2 times, right? Because you're trying to run down the clock. Like what you really have a problem with is the 3rd and 4 play call. And I can understand some pushback on that specific one. But Swain, on 2nd and 7, they might have had a first down with Devin Neal if one guy didn't kind of blow things up and make that mistake. They still got 3 yards even with that happening. But if you execute and you run the ball 3 times and get a first down, nobody's talking about the fact that you ran. They're saying, "Oh, you're a genius for running the ball 3 times." And so it's one of those where I think people need to detach a little bit from the results of a play and what you're thinking and calling going into the play, because sometimes you can have the exact right play call and somebody can mess it up. These are 18 to 22-year-old kids, and so when you look at that can be frustrating, and I get that part of it. Like I said, it wasn't the play call that I would have made. I probably would have gone to speed option in that circumstance. The old saying, whoever has the chalk last, usually wins. And by giving the offense a read after the snap, the offense has the chalk last. And so I think speed option to the wide side probably would have been what I would have run. Yep. But at the same time, I didn't have a problem running the ball. And quite frankly, like you said, if guys had kind of made the blocks that they were supposed to make or whatever, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation right now, because either they get the first down or they're setting up a 4th and 1 or something where you go ahead and say, you know what, let's run this thing again and get a first down here.
Yeah. And look, I mean, execution is not sexy to talk about. It might be like the bottom 2 sexiest things to talk about in football. It's not fun, but I think this game is a perfect illustration of what happens when KU executes well, right? You look at the end around Luke Grimm.
Oh, beautiful.
They did that perfectly. And all of a sudden you got just a canal opening for Luke Grimm to run into because KU's offensive line and everyone else blocked it well. And that for me, Kevin, maybe is like watching this offense sometimes is just the most, is it frustrating? Maybe frustrating, but just
Yeah,
like head scratching thing. There have been good play calls in these games, and KU just has not executed. And it's so confusing to me looking at a team that I would say was really good at executing. Did Jason Bean throw some picks last year? Sure. But I think pretty consistently KU executed pretty well.
yeah.
And just this year, it's been so hot and cold. And you watch plays like the Luke Grimm one. Um, I mean, shoot, the speed options are well executed plays, right? Good decisions. Like you can see
The,
those. And then
the
sometimes
touchdown run
when
from
there's
Highshaw where Casey cut
ah,
at the point of attack, I mean, that was beautiful. I mean,
perfect.
you couldn't have drawn it up any better than the way that went.
Yeah, and KU's able to do this, whether it be through the ground or through the air. And then all of a sudden it just goes away. And that for me is just the most like head scratching part of this for this offense, and just why at times you're just like, what is going on here? Where it can look so good for I think a good portion of the second half, and then KU gets in that stretch where they just go punt punt, and you're just like, what happened? So it's
Well,
just one of those things for KU that's just frustrating to see.
you think about like the Jalen like absolute dot that he threw to Luke Grimm on the sidelines for a really nice play when Grimm, got down and caught it kind of on his knees.
Yeah,
Kansas had a touchdown on that play, Swain, but the pass rush was in Jalen's face the second he turned around off the play action. So you can't make that throw. You got to scramble and earn yourself time. And so there's a lot of things like that when you go back and watch, again, execution is not sexy to talk about, but you see things like, well, Andy Kotelnicki designed a walk-in touchdown for these guys or whatever else. So against Illinois, Jalen Daniels' third interception, Quentin Skinner had a walk-in touchdown down the seam if it's thrown when it should be thrown. And I'm not putting that all on Jalen. Like, that's the really frustrating thing to me, Swain, is it would be so easy if it were just Jalen, or if you could point it at one guy, because you could either try to fix that guy or you could replace that guy, right?
yeah,
But it feels like it's different guys at different points, and that's the frustrating thing about it. And I know we're going to talk about explosive plays when we get to West Virginia.
yeah,
I think one of the bigger things that's really troubling KU to this point is they aren't having the same level of explosive plays. And so because of that, you're having to execute over and over and over and over again. Well, guess what? That gives you more chances to have a
exactly.
play where you don't execute.
Yep,
And that's why coaches talk about it all the time. When you have an explosive play, your chances of scoring on that drive go up just exponentially, because it cuts a certain number of plays off of that drive. And KU was able to get a few explosive plays in this one, but generally speaking, they weren't not generally speaking, they weren't able to get nearly as many as West Virginia was.
yeah, Kevin, KU's first two drives of the game, I just pulled it up. First touchdown drive, 13 plays, 83 yards.
And that's tough.
Right?
That's
That's
tough.
13 plays.
Executing for
That's a
13
lot.
plays, that's tough.
Right? Next touchdown, 10 plays, 75 yards. The next one was a 5-play, 75-yard. They had the explosive plays on that one. And then 6 plays, 54 yards, right? The last two are a little bit better offensively for KU. But you look at those first two drives of the game, right? And it's just a lot of plays to run. And it's like the inverse of what KU's defense used to force teams to do. You remember
Yeah.
talking, Kevin, in 2022, how it was like, well, they're trying not to give up explosive plays. So teams just kind of get 6 yards of play on them, but they at least have to go and run 13 plays a drive or something like that. That is what I feel like now is the inverse of what KU's offense is, where they really need these explosive plays to hit. And here we can really quickly, Kevin, I'm just kind of find this. So here's a good chart that illustrates this for KU. If you're just listening on a podcast, I'll do my best to explain it to you. Basically, it's a circle, and you want to fill the circle as much as possible. And if you look in kind of the bottom third, you can't see my mouse right now, but if you look at the bottom part, it says explosives, pass explosives. You can just see how KU's in the middle of the road. And then you look over to passing EPA play, which is how much more you are doing above expectation per play. KU's in the bottom 25% almost. And so you just see how KU's passing offense is just lacking that same pop that it has had. And that is what allowed KU last year, Jason Bean, to be so effective, is the fact that it didn't have to go on those long drives. And so that when you look at this offense, that is one of the big things that has changed, is just the lack of explosive passing is putting so much pressure on everyone else to execute consistently. And that's just hard to do.
Yeah, it's really tough to do. And again, we'll get into the defense here in a minute, but West Virginia had 5 scoring drives yesterday. One was like an 8-play, like 32-yard drive. But if you take that one out and look at the other 4 drives, Swain, 24 plays, 273 yards. That's 11.4 yards per play on those 4 scoring drives. And so you don't have to be perfect when you're chunking it up like that. You don't have to execute over and over and over again when you're just eliminating basically 20 or 30 or whatever yards at a time. And so that's something that I think KU's defense is struggling with right now, but it's something that the offense is struggling with the inverse of that. They aren't getting enough explosive plays to really make life easier on everyone.
Yeah, and look, Kevin, like we can talk all we want about the offense. The offense is not why KU lost this game, right? We can probably switch to the defense a little bit and talk about that, because the reason that you see a win probability chart like this is when your defense, gives up what would have been to a 75-yard drive and a 67-yard drive in a grand total of about a little over 4 minutes and 15 seconds.
Yep.
So,
this
right, I think so much, right, Kevin, has been about the offense to start the year, right? Illinois, the offense. UNLV, the offense. Like, this is the game that is you just pin it's on the defense, right? Yeah, the offense could have done a little bit better in a couple spots, but you put up 28 points. Your defense held West Virginia to what was it, 17? Yeah, 17 points because they had a 2-point conversion. 17 points for most of the game. And then all of a sudden at the end, you just can't stop them.
Yep.
It's bad.
Well, and this is 3 games in a row now that Kansas has lost with the defense giving up these quote unquote money drives when you absolutely can't have them. And people will talk about the final drive. I thought the really devastating drive was their second to last one, because you're up 11 points. You're in a spot where, hey, they can score on this drive if you make them take a lot of time. And Kansas didn't do that. West Virginia was able to chunk it out. They were able to score incredibly quickly. And all of a sudden, you're back in a game. All the momentum is with West Virginia at that point. And so if you had forced them into, even if they scored, Swain, if you had forced them into a 10 or a 13-play drive, you probably win this football game, because there's just not enough time left. There's not enough opportunities left for them there. Instead, you did the absolute one thing that you could not do, and that was let them go right down the field really quickly. They get the 2-point conversion as well to make it a 3-point game, whereas if you get that stop on that final drive, Swain, you're just looking for a field goal. And you're in a much better place. And so that 2-point conversion play was huge. The fact that they let West Virginia go down the field so quickly was huge. It was pretty much the most devastating drive you could give up at that point.
Totally, right. And that's the drive, Kevin. It starts with the 16-yard pass, then a 26-yard pass, and all of a sudden they're at the KU 35-yard line.
Yep.
It's pretty simple. They just boom, boom, 2 plays. They're in reaching distance, and then from there, they're able to punch it in. And yeah, that last drive too, just a little bit more methodical from them. But like the Marvin Grant penalty, which was like, I don't get that, Kevin. How can someone run out of bounds and run back in bounds, and you expect a guy that's running at full speed to have that recognition that, oh, he just ran out of bounds, but he's back in bounds, so I'm going to let him keep running. Like,
and he barely stepped out of bounds. Yeah, he barely. Yeah. It wasn't like he was a foot out of bounds and then came back in. Like, he barely stepped out of bounds, and he was still going. And so, I mean, we both tweeted about it at the time, but that's just a brutal situation for Marvin Grant. I don't blame him at all for for that play. That's just a tough situation. I don't know what else he's supposed to do there, honestly.
No, and look, the stats for West Virginia, man. I mean, sheesh. Like
Yeah.
Garrett Green, I don't know if you've seen it, Kevin. I think he had, let me pull it up real quick. I had it earlier today. 59 yards after contact.
Yep.
59 yards after contact, averaged 4 yards per carry after contact.
Have you had the courage to look at Pro Football Focus to see how many missed tackles there were?
13, same as last week.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to say, watching the game yesterday, I was thinking, I don't want to go into Pro Football Focus to see what that missed tackle thing is. And it's frustrating, too, because we were talking about the execution on offense. On defense, it's not like this is always a bad tackling team, right?
Yeah.
There are some times that they're really, really good at it. They do a fantastic job on running backs of, padding guys up and getting them down to the turf. And for whatever reason, quarterbacks are just coated with Vaseline for them the last couple of weeks. It's ridiculous.
It is. This has been a thing though. Like the moment Kevin and I realized, oh my God, this KU defense is terrible against any sort of mobile quarterback, is when Tyler Shook at Texas Tech was running all over KU's defense in 2022. That was the moment I was like, what the heck? Like, this should not be happening. And it has continued when KU plays mobile quarterbacks. And don't look at what K-State's quarterback is good at. It's just not good. And Kevin, like, you want to look last week, Sluka had, I think it was like 123 rushing yards after contact. Like, it's you just got to tackle better. And it comes down to a lot of guys. Like, I could list anybody in the front seven, and there's a good chance they've missed a tackle on a quarterback the last 2 weeks. There's no positivity that comes from naming guys on that one, but like, it's just bad, Kevin. And the passing defense, this has been an Achilles heel for them all season. The explosive plays through the air. Here I'm pulling up this chart again for KU's defense. And like, you look at the left side, right? That's the passing stuff. It looks really, really good, right? KU's above the 75th percentile in pass success rate, yards per drop back. But then all of a sudden you look over at the explosive stuff and passing explosive, KU is less in probably about 40th percentile in that. Explosive plays overall, KU's probably in the 35th percentile. This is the defense, Kevin, that has gone from being one that limits explosive plays, but maybe allows longer scoring drives, to one that is actually good down to down. And then all of a sudden they allow a big explosive play. And I guess a part of that too is you're just like, you can't even say they're good down to down, because in a game like this, 25% of West Virginia's plays went for either 10 yards or more on the ground or 15 yards or more through the air. Like, that's just unacceptable. It can't happen.
Donaldson had like the 27, I think, yard run that just kind of broke free for him. Other than that, the 11 carries they gave to running backs went for 26 yards. So, I mean, to your point, it's they do a really good job of that. But you look at West Virginia's top 3 wide receivers yesterday in yards. All 3 of them had 2 or more catches, and all 3 of them averaged 20 or more yards per catch. Over a combined, I think, 11 catches. So you're giving up just these huge chunks, and it really hurt on that touchdown drive. I felt like they came out in a little bit of soft zone to start that thing out. I also think, they were able to blitz and kind of affect Garrett Green a little bit when they sent guys. When they didn't send guys, they didn't do either thing right? Like, if you aren't sending guys, you either want to get to ideally you get to the quarterback and stay in your rush lanes, but you need to do one or the other, right? Like, you either need to get to the quarterback or stay in your rush lanes. When KU was rushing 4, the number of times Green was able to get out of the pocket because guys weren't in their rush lanes was way too often, and yet they still weren't getting to him. They weren't creating pressure. And so I'm not 100% sure what the answer is at this point. I think the interesting thing is a lot of us went into this year thinking that safety was a really, really good position. And with Marvin Grant moving up and playing a lot more, close to the line, sort of in that Cinco role, where did West Virginia make a lot of its hay? It was over the middle of the field.
Yep, exactly. And I think that comes down to, and look, Kenny Logan was not a great coverage guy. So you can't even put that on him. I just think this is it's a scheme thing, Kevin. Because you want to know what? I can go back to last year, Texas Tech at home. What happened? Right? K needs to stop on the last drive. They come out and prevent defense. Texas Tech, boom, 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 game-winning field goal. Go to the Oklahoma game, prevent defense. Oklahoma gets enough yardage after a couple plays to get a shot at the end zone at the end of the game. Yep. Like, this has just been a thing that happens to KU, and it's got to be looked at, because it's been consistent over multiple years now, where at times late in the game, KU gets really conservative on defense and just drops guys, 15 yards off the ball. And then basically is just allowing stuff underneath. And when a team like West Virginia has the athletes that it does, right? There's that play earlier in the game where I think it's just a small little slant route that I think I think it was a tight end or one of their big wide receivers took for, I think that was one of the 25, 26-yard gains because it was a catch and run because he had nobody around him because people were dropping back. There was space underneath. And so for KU, this has been a recurring issue. And it's something that's got to be fixed because KU is going to be in a lot more one-score games this year, and you can't allow teams to move the ball as easily as West Virginia did.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this for years, it feels like now, Swain, in terms of the Big 12 is decided by one-score games. It has been for the last few years. That may be even more the case this year when you look at how sort of wild it is and how close so many different teams are. The gap between 4-8 and 8-4, I mean, it's like that. It is absolutely tiny, and it's funny is the wrong word for it. Derek Johnson, who obviously we used to both talk to quite a bit on Rock Chalk Sports Talk, figured out if you look at the peak win percentages against Illinois, UNLV, and West Virginia, the odds of a team losing all three of those games, 0.17%. That's not 17%. That's not 1.7%. That's 0.17% to lose all three of those games. And to some extent, when that happens, right, you just say, oh, my gosh, you just got to get lucky. The ball hits your guy in the chest on a fumble against UNLV. You fall on it. Maybe things change or whatever else. But at the same time, I do think, Swain, that this is a team that, despite all the senior leadership, despite the continuity in a lot of different areas, this is a team that is finding a way to kind of drop those extra percentile points. And I know you covered Matt Campbell at Iowa State. And Matt Campbell is kind of infamous for
he's an expert at that.
Yeah, not doing well in close games. And for the most part, it balances out, right? Like, there are Nick Sabans of the world who seem to win like every close game. Bill Snyder was very much that same way at Kansas State. Most coaches are somewhere in the middle where it's like, okay, you didn't get the bounces in this year. You may get them this year. Maybe you'll get them next year. It kind of vacillates a little bit.
Yeah.
Right now, this year, Kansas is making the plays or not making the plays that make up that little bit of percentage difference to make you lose games that are right there for you to win.
Exactly. It's all in the fourth quarter. And I think for me, Kevin, I got sick at the end of last week, and so my energy was zero, and I didn't have the time to write this. But the quotes from Devin Neal were pretty alarm bells ringing in my head. Devin Neal's talking about how they have to strain more at the end of practices. The offense does, and how it comes down to conditioning. That's why KU didn't finish strong against UNLV. It was conditioning. And I don't know if that's him trying to rile up teammates, if that's just him trying to send a message to other guys on offense, or if that's just what he feels like with the offense. But the fact that you've got one of your leaders coming out and saying, hey, we have not, strained hard enough at the end of practices. We have not finished practices well. We're not conditioned well enough to end the game. Guys have to push themselves harder. like, I don't know what to say, Kevin.
Well,
Like,
you add
how?
that, and I know Jeff Grimes isn't everybody's favorite guy right now, but you add that to what Jeff Grimes said after the Illinois game, right? When we asked, hey, what was it like watching film with the guys? He said, I didn't go
Practice.
over the game's film with them. I showed them practice film. Basically, the implication was if you aren't doing this right on Tuesday, you're not going to do it right on Saturday. And
Yeah.
so if you just had the Grimes thing or just had the Devin Neal thing, you might say, oh, that's one thing. But a couple of
Yeah.
them, I mean, the smoke alarm's going off right now, isn't it?
Well, yeah. And then you have Lance Leipold, right? He does an interview when he gets to the team hotel with Brian Haney. It's always interesting to listen to, and I put this in my VIP article yesterday that he basically is like, we put some more emphasis on things at the end of practice. So finishing practice harder is how I read that, or finishing practice the right way, doing some specific things there. And that didn't show up in the game. And that just is another one for me where I'm like, there's a disconnect happening here. And I can't figure it out, because that's not what I expected to hear for a team that has 30 seniors
Sure.
and talent over the field, that it comes down to practice, right? You'd think that, I don't know. I would just, in my head, and maybe I'm not thinking about this the right way, Kevin, but I would just think that you'd know at this point in time what good practice habits look like, and you know how to have them. But I don't know. It's also hard to be consistent, right? That's not an easy thing to
Sure.
do in life.
Sure. Yeah. If it were easy, everybody would do it. And Saban talked all the time about, hey, if you want to be mediocre, it's real easy to be mediocre. It's the other stuff is hard, and we know how to be good, right? Like the steps that you have to take. It's not a secret. Like people
Hmm.
know you have to strain, you have to get a little bit better every day. You have to do all the things that every coach at every level, there's probably a third grade coach out there on the football field with this team right now telling guys that, they need to approach things a little bit differently so that they're the best team in their third grade league by the end of the year. And yet at the same time, that's not an easy thing to do. Like that's the uncomfortable route that you have to go. And like you said, sort of I don't want to say frustrating, I don't want to say scary, but the thing that kind of bothers you a little bit about this is the fact that it's, hey, these guys have been here when there wasn't success. They've been there when nobody was coming to the booth to watch them play. When a lot of these guys have been here when it was an over season. And quite frankly, in that over season, Swain, you saw it, they didn't compete. Like, I mean, forget about, hey, they didn't win any games. They had like one game that was close that entire year and got run off the field in pretty much every other game. And so you would think and or hope, hey, these guys, they understand what they need to do because they've seen that process. The hard thing about it is from 2020 to 2023, there was a period of time there. Now all of a sudden you're trying to turn things around in a week or two, and that's not nearly as easy a thing. And quite frankly, football is such a wonderful sport, but it's a frustrating sport in a lot of ways, in that you prepare for 9 months to play 3, basically. And if you didn't prepare right in those 9 months, your 3 probably aren't going to go real well.
That said really, really well, Kevin. So what are your expectations now for the rest of the season? Because this is something where you look at the schedule, right? TCU comes into town this week. KU's a 1.5-point favorite over TCU. At least that's what it opened at. We'll see how that goes through the rest of the week. TCU just got 66 hung on them by SMU. Their coach got ejected. Just a weird game. And then KU goes on the road to play Arizona State, right? A team that has been, I think, better than I expected this year, right? They beat Mississippi State. They beat, who was it? Texas State, I want to say. Yeah, Texas State. Because, and then they just lost, 1-score game to Texas Tech. Like, Arizona State's decent. That's going to be a home game for Arizona State. that kickoff time will come out on Monday, but I'd assume that's a night game just because it's still early enough in the year where I think that's going to make a lot of sense to be a night game. And then it's a bye week. And I think for KU, it's like, first of all, you just got to take it 1 week at a time.
Sure.
But you just look at the schedule. And then after that, right, it's Houston at home, K-State on the road, the other bye week, then Iowa State at home. Like, right now is the winnable period, right? The next 3 games are the quote unquote winnable games. 2 after that are going to be really freaking hard.
Yeah. At the same time, I mean, you saw the K-State BYU game, and you look at it, and there's not a team that's left on KU's schedule that's invincible. And I'm not saying, hey, KU should turn it on and they'll win the rest of their games. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that if KU gets to a point where they start executing at a higher level, they start finding more explosives, the things that we're talking about, there isn't a game left on the schedule that's unwinnable. And so I'm not saying they're going to win all of them. Quite frankly, I don't know if they will turn it around. I mean, that's a real question at this point. We're a third of the way into the season. I know that sounds crazy to say, but we've already played, we've already seen them play a third of these games. And so to me, I don't have a number for you. I'd love to just be like, oh, well, all right, like there's 8 games left, 7-1, or 2-6. I don't have a number for you. I do think it's so important for them to kind of find themselves over these next couple games, because I don't think that there's a game left on the schedule that I look at and say, well, they can't win this game. But the thing is the other part of it, Swain, is if they don't figure things out, I'm not sure there's a game on the schedule. I mean, maybe Houston, where you look at it and you say, well, Kansas is also definitely going to win this game.
I watched Baylor last night. They stink. They're terrible.
I still can't believe they lost that game. That was
they stink.
To give up that Hail Mary like that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, the Hail Mary is crazy. Colorado also stinks, but they've got the issue with Colorado is they stink, but they've got 3 really sweet players and they happen to play really important positions.
Yeah, they've got great skill position talent, but up front, not maybe so great.
Yeah, exactly. So I think you're right, Kevin. Like, I've tried to be a positive-ish person this year. And I'm running out of my positivity because there have been slight improvements, but just the fact that the same issues, Kevin, keep coming up week over week. I just don't know what to say. Like, I expected stuff that popped up in 1 week to be corrected or at least show improvement. And there have just been so many things that have shown up week over week, right? KU not finishing halves well, right? That has been an issue consistently all season.
Yeah.
KU not tackling the quarterbacks, been an issue all season. KU not getting a pass rush, been an issue. Yep. KU not being consistent on offense. Like, there's so many things that have been consistent issues that you're just like you said, you're a third of the way through the season. You'd think that some of this stuff would start to really move forward. And at this point, it's not. And so that for me is like, you just got to see. And that's the thing about football too, Kevin. Like, KU could roll out against TCU and just figure it out. And everyone could start executing and on both sides of the football, and it could all change. But how likely is that?
Even with the other issues, and we've talked about on offense, how it's been several different players. If Jalen Daniels from 2022 comes back, just like sort of reappears like, hey guys, I'm here, that solves a lot of issues, doesn't it? Right? Yeah. Like having a quarterback who can play like that, it masks a lot of stuff. And so I'm not putting this all on Jalen. I'm just saying, I thought this was as good as Jalen's looked this year against West Virginia. Like you said, he wasn't perfect. There were still some faults, things like that. But if Jalen figures things out over the next week or two, then Kansas has a chance to I mean, there's not a team on the schedule that I think they can't beat, but there's also a lot of teams on the schedule that if they keep playing this way, they've got a great chance to lose to. And so there's that uncertainty there. And I get a lot of the fan frustration. I think pretty much everybody is there, especially with expectations. And I think people had really invested a lot into this team. And I think they invested a lot into this team, one, because they thought they'd be really good. Obviously, people were talking about Kansas as a dark horse college football playoff contender, but also because with those 30 seniors, Swain, you kind of felt like next year was maybe going to be a step back a little bit. And so this is the year. And so with all those things being said, I 100% get the frustration. Kansas can still accomplish some of its goals. You can still go out and have those things there, but there are still a lot of things to clean up at this point, and we're a third of the way through the season.
Yep, I think you nailed it. And so now KU gets to go to Arrowhead, and I am not super encouraged on what this is going to look like in terms of attendance.
I was going to say, I figured you were talking about attendance right there.
Yeah. Woof.
Well, and
Kevin, would you, all right, here, if you are, let's say you got two kids, right? Sports are starting to pick up, right? Soccer, all that. Like, would you go and pay? You got to pay $50 for parking, got to pay for tickets, I think maybe KU's covering the fees right now. Like, if you were a casual Kansas football fan who really was excited for the season, has watched this over the last couple of weeks, would you go to the game?
See, and those are the guys that they're going to lose, I think, is the casual people that, I think that you have sort of a baseline of people who are rain or shine and will be there.
Totally.
But here's the other part about it, Swain, and we've talked about this, but a sellout for Kansas the last few years has been 47,000 people at the booth. You put 47,000 people into Arrowhead, that place is going to look empty.
Yeah, here, Kevin, you want to give me 1 second? I can actually use a photo I took over the summer, but you're right. And so here's my thing when I look at this, Kevin. You're right, 45,000. Let's say there's 40, and that would be a good, not a sellout, but a good crowd at the booth.
Sure.
Alrighty, let me do this. Like, this is going to be something that I just think visually, there are going to be a lot of people at the game. Do not get me wrong. I think you're right. The amount of people, like the base level of the fan base, I think is much, much improved. People that are rain or shine, right? I think that has improved. But a place like Arrowhead is built to have the quote unquote people who are just getting into college football, right? College football continues to blow up. And it's just a situation where this was the perfect type of stadium for that type of fan. And so that's the part that's just it's just a bummer because it would have been really cool to see it like this. So here we go. All right, I got it. It's processing still. Well, basically, so I was at the Copa America this summer. You were there too. Or wait, were you? I can't remember.
No.
So this is what it looks like. I was sitting up top. The attendance for this game was 55,000. And this is what 55,000 looks like at Arrowhead. And I think you're probably looking at, what do you think, 40 for this week?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think it could. You're hoping for 40. Let me put it that way, because TCU isn't a big traveling fan base. I mean, we saw 2 years ago when they came to the booth. I feel like you maybe even saw more than you normally would because it was College Game Day and all the things around it, and TCU was undefeated. Because is the casual TCU fan going to be there? I mean, after getting absolutely run by SMU and losing the game to UCF and all of those things, I don't think you're going to get much help from an opposing fan base. I think your point about KU fans is well put as well, and so I think you're almost like hoping for 40. And to be frank, we both talked to Travis Goff about this, and that's why some people are like, well, build the booth to the same level of fans, build it, maybe even a little more. And one of the things that he said is we want to have home field advantage, right? We want to make it to where this thing is filling up and our team has a good chance to win. And maybe doing that at 41 or 42 gives you a better chance than, having it at 47 or 50. And I think when you look at Arrowhead, at the way that it's shaped and all of those things, this is one where you may be hoping for 40,000 fans to turn out. And maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe people will be so excited about the first Arrowhead game that they bought their tickets a long time ago and they said, you know what, I'm going to be there. But I kind of think 40 is almost what you're hoping for at this point.
And look, it's a 2:30 kick, right? And that's a good kickoff time, I think, for people. You can get in, you can do some of your tailgating stuff, right? Individual tailgates,
Yep.
And I think that can work. I just am really interested in what the student crowd is like. The students, I thought, did a great job at Children's Mercy Park. They've been really into it. How many are willing to make the trip now, right? How many of the kind of borderline, like, again, talked about the fans who are just getting into college football or are into Kansas football right now and have paid attention, but really were ready to go to a game this year if things had gone well, maybe aren't going to go now. The students can be like that too, where, I mean, I knew when I was a student at KU, like there were a certain group of guys that I knew, probably 10 to 15, that were always going to be down to go to a KU game. If you said, there's probably another group about 20 to 30 that are like, if it's the, like what, Texas game, in what, in 2016? Yeah. Like we'll go to that, but not going to go to other stuff. And so that's kind of the area I'm curious to. And look, it'll be a good environment. Just my biggest concern is almost what's it going to look like on TV, because I think people will be maybe a little bit more spread out because the upper deck tickets are available and those are going to be cheaper. And that's a lower cost entry point for families. And so that's also my concern with it, is how kind of dispersed is it going to look? So.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. I mean, I covered a lot of state championship games down in Texas when I was there, high school state championship games. And a lot of times they would draw 45, 50. I think the high was up into 52 or 55 at the state title games at Jerry World. And in those circumstances, everybody was sitting in the closest possible seats, right? So you had like the bottom level, but the upper stuff, you didn't really have people up there, and you could feel that it was, I don't want to say like empty, but fairly empty in those circumstances. And that, again, might be 15,000 more people than what we're expecting, one. And two, to your point, if they're spread out, if you've got some people in the bowl, but they don't really fill up the lower levels. And then you've got, this family that got like the nosebleed seats that's way up in the corner. I think that could make for, not necessarily a great look. And it doesn't have to be a great look. I mean, it's not like they're going to play at Arrowhead every single year or anything like that.
Exactly.
They're going to return back home next year. But at the same time, if you're trying to build and generate momentum, game day experiences are a big part of that, right? And you're trying to raise money. Game day experiences are a big part of that. If you draw 65,000 fans out there and everybody has a great time as KU football wins, things are probably going to go a little bit better for you.
Yeah. And right, that's one of the cool parts of college sports, right? Is that it's about that connection, right? Whether it be the fact that you went to KU or you went to a different school, but you kind of always liked KU growing up. If you're from the Kansas City area, just from the state of Kansas, like that's what makes college sports cool. And I also, Kevin, I did realize that I mentioned TV. It's on ESPN Plus. So the amount of casuals watching who haven't actually like seen, KU games, I'm not sure if they're going to be seeking out Kansas versus TCU on ESPN Plus.
I do have to ask you a general college football question, though.
Uh-oh.
You thought TCU made fun of the game being on the CW, and then they
I saw of it. I didn't see the actual thing.
Yeah, and then both SMU and the CW poked fun at TCU basically for doing that. And then the other one was the K-State fan suggesting that he would do a certain something with a beefy 5-layer burrito. Did you see that thing?
Yes, I've seen it. Just like I saw the Florida State fan. I just don't want to say anything.
He says that BYU wins that game.
Oh,
And
I did see that.
BYU's official Twitter account tweets out like pictures from the game with the line "Live Moss." So I guess my question is, who got ethered worse, the K-State fan or the TCU account from the CW and everything?
Well, considering TCU got smacked by its rival, like it might be TCU, but I will give the creativity points to BYU. And I didn't think I loved last year, Kevin, when BYU came to play at KU because everyone from BYU was so nice. It was super cool because it was BYU's first Big 12 game. And they're like, hey, do you mind moving for a sec so we take a photo of the field? Like it's first Big 12 game. We're super excited. I did not know they had that type of talk in them. That was funny.
It was pretty hilarious. I think social media accounts across college football feels like they're stepping up their game a little bit.
It's harmless. Nobody's hurt by that. The K-State fan's going to be laughing to himself that better be laughing to themselves that they got roasted by the BYU main Twitter account.
I am glad he posted like either a picture or a video of him having the beefy 5-layer burrito. I am very happy. I do not believe that he posted what occurred after actually purchasing said burrito. So,
Kevin, the after hours part of this podcast starts in about 7 hours, so you might want to keep that one.
We'll just save that one for a while. But just saying, the KU loss wasn't everybody's favorite, but the sun did come out. College football is still college football, and Kansas does still have 8 games left, Swain, starting at Arrowhead this week.
Yeah, it'll be exciting. Look, each game's gonna be really interesting because Kansas can be in it and Kansas can win, right? This isn't 2020 when you're going in every week being like, all right, well, how much is Kansas going to lose by this week, right? It's a very different situation. And, what was the saying in Ted Lasso? It's the hope that kills you.
Yeah.
Like that is very much this season. But I'm sure there's going to be a good portion of the fan base, right? That's going to have that hope again this week. And my God, Kevin, I've already looked at some of the advanced stats for TCU and I'm already talking myself into it.
Yep. That's the that's the wonder of college football is you don't have to be great every week, but hey, you could be great this week. You just don't know.
You just don't. So we'll be here to cover it all, as we always are. Rain or shine, good or bad, we'll be here. Kevin, thanks as always. Where can people check out all your stuff? Make sure you're checking out all of Kevin's podcasts and Twitter content.
You guys can watch us over at Kansas City Sports Network. There's Pay Heat, and then there is a podcast that I think we're going to try and get Swain on here before too long, the Verbal Commitment podcast, where we look at kind of local recruiting in Kansas and Kansas City. And so that's a fun one as well. We've talked about KU guys like Juju Marks and seen some of those guys and given our scouting reports over there. So give it a look.
Sweet. Awesome. Kevin, thanks a bunch for coming on. If you enjoyed the podcast, please leave a rating and review on the podcast platform of your choice. If you're watching on YouTube, thanks as always for checking us out. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment, and hit that little notification bell so you get an alert every time we post a video. Obviously, plenty more coming your way. We'll talk to Jeremy Clark in the middle of the week. We'll talk to Jack Ritter towards the weekend. Lots going on in the world of Kansas football, so stay tuned to fog.net, and we'll keep you covered.